Good morning, everybody. I will be very brief because you are here to listen to Steve Wheeler, not to me. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Steve Wheeler, who probably most of you already know, or maybe you don't know him personally, but you follow him as in a Twitter account or in his successful blog. Steve is an associate professor of learning technologies at the University of Plymouth in southwest England. He was originally trained as a psychologist, but maybe because of fate, I don't know, he will explain that. He spent his entire career in working with media, social media, technology, and learning, and predominantly in teacher education and training. He has authored hundreds of, more than 100 scholarly articles, and he has a successful blog, and he, as I said, he has more than 9,000 followers. So, it's our pleasure to have him here to start this conference. And before I allow Steve to start with his presentation, I would like to say, as Emma said, that we really encourage you to actively participate in the discussion. And if you are, please don't be shy and don't keep your questions to yourselves. But if you are really a shy person, don't forget that we have the Twitter channel, and you can use it for formulating questions. So, as I said, I don't want to spend more time talking. So please, Steve, when you want to proceed.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Hola. ¿Cómo está? Muy bien. That's the extent of my Spanish, I'm afraid. It's very nice to be here. It's one of my favorite cities, Barcelona, and I really am grateful to everybody for inviting me to speak at this session today. It is such illustrious company. It's great to see you all here, and I hope to have conversations with many of you over the next 2 days while I'm here. In fact, I don't fly out until I think tomorrow night, very late. So I'm conscious that the Twitter wall is in front of me here, and I can't see what's going on, so there's plenty of opportunities for you to tweckle me. You know, Twitter heckling, have you heard of that? Or harsh tagging, as they call it. You can say rude things about the speaker, and they don't see it. But I promise you, I will track you down if you do, all right? I will track you down and put bugs in your dinner or something, you know. And I can come around and oh, it's off now. They've turned it off. I wonder why that is. But no, seriously, if you want to ask questions on Twitter, then please do so. That's my name on Twitter, Tim Buckteeth. Don't ask me why. Just read the blog, and it'll tell you for you what it's all about. I think if I just put this slide up here now. It was sad news today. I just want to pay a tribute to a man who was a visionary. You've probably all heard that he passed away, Steve Jobs. And it really is, I suppose, down to him that we have devices such as this in our pockets now. I think he was a true visionary. I won't read the poem to you. You can read it yourself later on. There's also a video that talks about Here's to the Crazy Ones. One thing that Steve Jobs taught me was that you don't ask for permission. You ask for forgiveness. And that's been the mantra of my life. I like to just go ahead and do things without permission. And if they go wrong, then fine, I will say sorry. If they go right, then I'll carry on and do more of it. So that's my kind of philosophy in life, really. So thank you, Steve, wherever you are, for what you've done for education. But here's a problem that we all share as teachers, as educators. It's a huge problem, because what we're trying to do is prepare young people for a world of work which we can't describe yet, because we don't know what it's going to be like. Undergraduates who are coming into their first year of their degree this year, in 3 years' time, they will be entering into a world of work which we don't know what it will look like. We don't know what the jobs will look like. We don't even know what the economy will be doing in the next week, let alone what the jobs will be like in 3 years' time. So this is a really invidious position we are in as educators. It's a really difficult situation for us. How do we prepare children and young people for a world of work which doesn't exist yet? Well, the answer is not to give them facts anymore. It's not to provide them with knowledge anymore, because knowledge goes very quickly out of date. The secret is to provide them with the ability to go off and learn skills which they can then transfer into any changeable situation. To be flexible, to be able to problem solve on the fly, so to speak, without having to consult books or manuals, to be able to have the skills and the literacies inside them, which they can then apply to any changeable situation. This is what education is going to be about in the future. And so David Wallach's right, I think. And I just want to show you a picture of Arthur C. Clarke here, who is a science fiction writer who also is no longer with us, but he said some very interesting things about education, which I'm going to quote to you throughout this short presentation. I'll come back to him later on. But one of the things about new and emerging technologies is that they're always met with opposition. I like this picture because it says a lot about what happens when you try and introduce a new idea or a new technology. There is always opposition from somebody because people don't like change. People don't like to have to make some new effort to learn something new. And I was talking about this last night, and there'll be a few sniggers in the room from people who were there. The IPD, every university, every school has one of these. Do you know what an IPD is? It's Innovation Prevention Department. It's the, you can't do that, you know. I'm not going to allow you to do that because, you know, and they give you rules and they give you regulations about what you should not be able to do. They don't tell you what you can do. They say you can't do that. And they prevent you from doing something that's new. It could be your IT department. Yeah, it's some nods around the room, people recognizing this. It could be your human resources department. I like to say about some human resources department, they are neither one thing nor the other. They're neither human nor resources. But sorry if there are any personnel people here, but sometimes they do prevent things from happening in a very big way. And we have to kind of try and get around this problem in our organizations if we're going to look at how we put new ideas into the situation. Arthur C. Clarke said about new technologies that any technology that is sufficiently advanced, it's indistinguishable from magic, and this frightens people. If you were maybe 10 years ago to have seen the iPad, you would think it was a prop from Star Trek or something, wouldn't you? But nowadays, everybody finds them very useful if they're using them, and people are using them naturally now. Young people in particular have this very natural propensity to be able to swipe things and to pinch things and make them move on the screen. They know how to do it naturally for some reason. I think that's really important for us to remember as educators as we move into the 21st century and the technology that comes with it. We're battling against a common enemy here, and it's ignorance. That's the common enemy all teachers have to battle against. It's not about lack of knowledge, it's about ignorance. It's a different thing, and I'll show you what I mean. Do you see that? This is an incredible picture because what you see there is actually permanent. It doesn't rub off like a whiteboard. You know, it's permanent, and it's showing the way to education. It's pointing the direction to literacy. And Derek Bock once said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And he's right. We've got to fight ignorance in our societies because ignorance is the cause of all wars. Ignorance is the cause of racism. Ignorance is the cause of all the ills of society. It's lack of the ability to see the truth or to see sense. And that's what teachers are in the business of doing. And I'm going to come to the idea in a minute about what is wrong with school. What is wrong with it? And Emma's really succinctly put this to us today. What is wrong with it? Do we teach to test? And if so, why do we have to do that? Can we not change this? Can we not make a difference? Can we not bring new innovations into education to change things so that young people have a great experience and they remember school as an incredibly good part of their life rather than something that they wanted to leave very quickly? So there are differences between what we think is good in schools and what is actually happening. The first thing is that schools have for a long time been on the industrial model. It's about synchronization of behavior. It's about making sure that everyone arrives at the same time. And when the bell goes, they move into another class. They are batch processed in ages. They are processed like factory products. And at the end of it, they come out with a piece of paper which says, this is what you have achieved in those so many years at school. And this does stifle creativity. So what do? We say, okay, let's bring technology in and see if that changes things. Nietzsche, I don't often quote Nietzsche, but he does say one interesting thing. In large state public education, it will always be, public education will always be mediocre because it's the same reason as large kitchens producing bad cooking. Because it's so massive and so kind of massified, it's not personalized, and therefore young people do not get a personal experience. They only make what they can of it. So in effect, what we see in schools is young people are finding the curriculum less challenging because they are having out-of-school experiences. They're using technology outside of school, which is much more exciting, and the experiences are much more exciting than what they experience in the classroom. That is a tragedy. They are actually finding self-directed learning more important than they find education in the schools or in the universities. They go there just to get the qualification, essentially, because they have to. Paulo Freire, who's heard of Paulo Freire? Great Brazilian theorist. He said that what we've got to do here is we've got to take the power structure and change it. We've got to bring the teachers down to the level of the students, or bring the students up to the level of the teachers so that they are equal to each other, and so that the teacher becomes a learner and the learner becomes a teacher. And I think that's what we call flipping the classroom. It's a really important concept for us to think about. Bertrand Russell, another philosopher, said, we wish to preserve the past rather than the hope of creating the future, because that's what dominates the minds of those who are teaching the young people. And it's so true. So here's a typical classroom from the last century. And we are now in an age where we can bring technology into the classroom to inspire young people. We want to take them away from this idea of regimentation. We want to take them away from this idea of synchronizing behavior. Not everybody, when the bell rings at 12:30, is hungry. And yet we expect them to be. This synchronization of behavior is something that is fracturing now in schools. So what do? We introduce new technologies and we say, okay, we make a change now. There we are. It's a great change, isn't it? All right, there are some positives here, because children and young people can experience personalized learning through these tools. But the thing is, the teacher is still maintaining control. The teacher is not letting go of that control. The teacher is still at the front directing, like a foreman in a factory. They are still saying, look at me, look to the front, face the front. They are still saying, pay attention, when in fact the students could be learning all sorts of new things and being creative if we didn't have this kind of configuration. Why do we have ICT suites? Why do we put computers in rooms? Why do we make students think that they have to go to a room to do computing when we have all these laptops and handhelds? Why do we make them think in a particular direction and say, this is the way you have to think? We don't have pencil rooms, do we? Do we have paper rooms? These are tools that we carry around with us, and so is the computer. So why do we have computer rooms? It's another big question I think we need to answer. Because they prefer desks, maybe. Desk computers, yeah, well, maybe. I think we should be avoiding buying too many desk computers now in institutes, and we should be going for handhelds and laptops, because learning is on the move these days. Another thing we do is we ban mobile phones in many schools. Do you ban mobile phones in Spanish schools? Yes? Well, these are the reasons why teachers think we should ban phones. They say they're distracting and disruptive. The phone becomes the focus of attention. Inappropriate images and videos can be taken. Invasion of privacy. Loss of teacher control was one of the biggest things that was said. They didn't want to lose control of the classroom. They didn't want behavior to be disruptive. But when you think that most teenagers and young people are actually using these tools as a part of their everyday life now, it's probable that we should try and trust our students more. Because what we're doing essentially is we are taking away their connections to their social world when we say to them, you must not use phones. And regardless of whether we ban phones or not in the schools, students will still use them. They'll just use them secretly. So, you know, my view on this is to get them to use them openly, and to get them to use them in ways which they can learn constructively and learn creatively. It's a bit like the internet. We say you must not, children must be kept away from the internet, and we must shield them from it, because It's dangerous. And so in the same way, we must not teach children to cross the road, because that's dangerous as well. You hear what I'm saying? So maybe this is a bit controversial for you, but I'm giving you my opinions here, and you can shout at me later on and we can argue these points. Are we preparing young people for the future or for the past? That's the question. What are the needs for today's learners? Well, whatever we call them, some people call them the net generation. That's Don Tapscott and Anthony Williams, I believe. We have Homo sapiens, Wim Veen and Ben Vracking. We have also digital natives and immigrants from Mark Prensky. I'd like to tell you that firstly, there is no evidence to suggest that young people can actually use technology any better than older people. If my dad's watching today, hello Dad, he's 83 and he's on Skype, and he's also on Facebook, and he's also on various other tools. So I think this age distinction is actually very wrong. It's an error to assume that young people can come into a classroom and learn how to use technology very easily. Lots of young people are technophobic, and people don't realize this because they accept this theory and swallow it without any argument at all. We need to be very careful when we try and categorize people into these zones. But having said that, young people do have more opportunity to use technology than we did when we were their age, and that, I think, is an important difference. And so here are some of the things, that the new literacies, as I call them, that young people should think about acquiring. This goes back to my statement in the beginning about what do young people need to enter a world of work which we cannot yet clearly describe. The important thing here is that these are actually literacies, not just skills. A skill is okay because it will help you to do something. A literacy is more than a skill. A literacy is the ability to be able to engage fully with your culture. And these are emerging cultures that we're looking at here. So identity management, for instance. Young people are having to be aware that if they put something up onto Facebook, it will be there forever. And if it's a picture of them falling out of a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning, absolutely out of their head, drunk, then what will happen in 3 years' time when their potential employer Googles them and finds that picture? Will they get the job? Especially if they're training to be a teacher. So other things like self-presentation, reusing and repurposing of content, organizing, filtering and selecting. All of these things are new literacies which young people need to acquire. And it's down to teachers, like you and me, to help them to acquire these literacies. One of the ones that isn't on there is transliteracy, which is the ability to present yourself equally well across many platforms. And that's increasingly what young people are having to do these days. So in fact, they're having to learn new languages and assimilate new ways of presenting themselves in different ways across different platforms. These are the things that young people want. They want anytime, any place, and they want personalized learning. Ask any young person, and they will tell you these things. They want to be able to learn wherever they are, whenever they are, and they want to learn in their own way. I just want to go through some of the trends here to show you how this works. If you can imagine, before the industrial age, there was an apprenticeship model. It still exists, but it died a little bit when mass education came in on an industrialized scale. So the Just For Me model was the original model, and then the Just In Case model with the standardized curriculum where you learnt everything just in case you needed Latin or you needed biology or whatever. So you learnt everything. Then towards the end of the last century, we started looking at the just-in-time model, the bespoke curriculum. And training companies in particular would bring this in and say, oh, okay, we will design a package for your workforce. And it was a just-in-time model which allowed them to solve problems there and then. But we are coming back full circle now to personalized learning, back to the Just For Me model. And in effect, what we're doing here is we are creating for ourselves personalized learning environments. And those environments can have a number of features in them. But essentially, they allow learners to take control. They allow them to set their own goals and to manage their own learning and to communicate with others, but they also ultimately rely on user-generated content. This is content that all people who are learning create for themselves. It may be a blog post, it may be a podcast or a video, it may be something else. set of notes that they have put onto Evernote or whatever. But essentially, here we go. What does it look like? Well, here's the philosophy behind this. I don't know if this guy was a real doctor or not, but he certainly made sense to me. Today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you. Everyone is individual. We are all personal, individual people. We all have our own hopes and fears and aspirations and skills to bring to the table. And that's me in the middle there. I love this picture. Personalization of learning, it's about individual differences being acknowledged. We can do this in social context very easily with the new tools that we have at our disposal. So here's the three main opportunities that we have with these tools. Personal web tools will allow us to generate that content. They'll allow us to organize it, and they'll allow us to share it as well. And we can name all sorts of tools that will do these jobs for us. So a blog, for instance, will generate and share content. Tagging will actually share and organize it. I think that e-portfolios and wikis sit somewhere in the middle because they do all those roles. And there are other tools as well that you could name, which will help us to organize all of this data and this content that we're creating for ourselves to learn. So personalized web tools really are about what the learner chooses to help them to do those things. But the personal learning environment is actually a lot bigger than that. There are other things in here. So like the personal learning network, for instance, which is also the people that you connect with. That's also part of your personal learning environment. So the people I connect with on Twitter will be different to the people you connect with because we're interested in different things. But it's still your personal learning environment. And finally, the whole thing, anything else also that you can add to that, which you find is unique to you and allows you to make sense of the world and negotiate the meaning of that knowledge around you. So that's my model of the personal learning environment. I will make these slides available to you afterwards. Ultimately, these things are the new skills and literacies that students need, I think, to be able to survive in a world of work that we cannot describe yet. It's not just about learning to learn, it's the critical thinking and the reflectivity and the evaluative skills, how to collaborate, how to work in teams, how to work on your own. All of these things are going to be really important for the future of work as we become more ambient and more flexible. Why do we use social media? Well, have a look at these figures. I think that's a stunning set of figures there. It's a phenomenon, and it's not going to slow down. It's not going to go away. It's going to grow and grow and grow. And as it grows, it will get faster. More tools will be available. Whole generations of people will gather around these totems as tribes, and they will exhibit their tribal behavior around these totems. And if we miss this opportunity as educators, then we're foolish. We've got to exploit, we've got to harness these technologies. We've got to find the best of each of them. YouTube, 25 hours now, a minute of video is being sent up to YouTube. Every minute, 25 hours. That's more than a day's worth of watching. Most of it's rubbish. Most of it's inaccurate or fake. But some of it is actually very, very good and gold dust and could be used with our students. So if you can imagine, you've got all this content out there, 17 million articles in English alone. I don't know how many in Spanish. You can imagine we need to start thinking about how we can use this and how we can filter it. So here's the global context. There are more phones, 3 times as many mobile phones now as there are computers in this world. And that's growing even more as we speak. We have to make use and harness the power of mobile technologies as well. The data consumed from mobiles is more than twice, almost 3 times what it was the year before. And it's exponentially growing as people come to grips with using mobile technologies for learning as well as for business and for leisure. And finally, something I've just said to you, social media use is on the rise. So all of this, we cannot ignore it any longer as teachers. We need to start paying attention to it and finding out how this can enhance and enrich and extend the educational experiences of our young people in our charge. It gives a voice to everybody. Even the shy students can speak using social media. I want to talk to you briefly about the new pedagogies that I see emerging, the new teaching and learning models that are coming about, and they're being driven by the changes that we see, including the social media changes around us. The first one, before I start that, I just want to talk to you about education as a word. We know that the original Latin word means to draw out from within. It means to bring out the potential of the person. It's not about instructing them. It's not about leading them. It's about helping them to bring out from themselves the best of what they are. So if we go back to that method and we look at Socratic kind of approaches, they're based on the idea about stimulating critical thinking. They're based on the idea about illuminating new ideas. They're based on the idea about getting people to think for themselves. This is where we need to go with education. It can involve self-organized learning. It can involve students doing it for themselves, but also look at this fact here. 80% of what we learn is outside the classroom. This isn't just my idea. This is the idea of people like Kofa and people like J. Cross. Loads of people have come up with this same figure, near enough a 20-80 split between what you learn formally and what you learn informally. We've got to pay attention to that as well. We've got to kind of gain the excitement from the informal learning and bring it back into the formal learning. We've got to find the stimuluses that are out there in informal learning and bring them, the excitement of that, into the classroom somehow. And we can do this if we think about who you know that's important, because in effect we don't store our knowledge in our heads so much anymore. We store it with our friends. And that's why the networks are important. Ishmael here knows things I don't know. I know things he doesn't know. When we talk to each other on Twitter, we learn from each other. I don't have to remember everything he knows, because he already knows it. All I have to do is know where he is. And then I can find him on Twitter, and then I can ask him the question. We're living in a distributed cognition world. You cannot know everything, but you can know someone who knows something that you don't know. Yeah? You get the point? That's connectivism. And the social networks, they help us to redefine all sorts of things like our identity. I was talking about this yesterday to some of your colleagues here. Identity, privacy, presence. They allow us to redefine power relationships as well. They enable all sorts of connections to be made which weren't made before. But ultimately, it's all about the shared interest, the gathering together around those totems, as I mentioned before. And I want to talk about Deleuze and Guattari's idea of rhizomatic learning, what I will call the anarchy of the web, because it's chaotic and it's uncontained and there's no center to it. So essentially, if you look at rhizome plants, like certain weeds that grow up, they pop up everywhere in the garden. You can pull them out, but they'll grow up elsewhere because the underlying structure is hidden from you. And we don't know which way it goes. It goes everywhere. It's chaotic. That's the same when we learn on the internet. It's non-hierarchical. It has multiple points. It has multiple possibilities, multiple connections. And knowledge can be renegotiated through this. It's not immutable. So we have this kind of notion that chaotic learning can take place and can be made sense of by each individual. You just have to provide them with the opportunities to find that content. The community becomes the curriculum. The idea is that the users constitute the knowledge themselves. What is important to them becomes a reality to them. It may not be agreeable with another community, but it's certainly their reality. And as such, that's the way the world is beginning to look to me. And finally, paragogy, the idea that we are all equal in this together. Back to Paulo Freire's idea that the student and the teacher need to level their relationship with each other. This is not Vygotskian. This is not about the knowledgeable other person dragging the learner into their new zone of proximal development. It's not about that theory at all. It's the reverse of that. It's about everybody helping each other. It's about a group think, a distributed cognition, the connectedness that makes each of us able to be valuable to each other within the same cohort, the same group. And we can do this through our technologies. I think that's a staggering picture. That's a tribute to Steve Jobs as well, isn't it, I suppose? 3 kinds of learner support have been identified. The academic support, according to Patricia Carnwell, is actually the domain traditionally of the teacher. The other two I've discovered with my own learners is one that they provide for themselves these days. If there are several of my students working on an online group together and one of them says, oh, I don't know how to do this, before I can get there usually one of my students has said to them, oh, this is how you do it. And they've supported each other without me getting in there. But increasingly they're also supporting each other academically as well. They're also supporting each other or scaffolding each other in these ways. John Seeley Brown says, we're seeing peer-based learning now, which is really powerful. And it's actually, they're learning more from each other than they are from the mentors and tutors and teachers. Now that's another clue for you as to the way education is going. So what will be the new teacher roles? And I'll finish with this. Any teacher who can be replaced by a computer should be, says Arthur C. Clarke. This is a consternation when the computers first came into schools. And some of the teachers asked me, Steve, will I be replaced by a computer? And I quoted this to them. Because teachers are not computers. Computers do not do the role of the teacher. They never have done and they never should do. I challenge anybody to show me a computer that can actually think. All right? Let alone do anything else. I challenge anybody to show me a computer that can gauge the emotions of a student and know when they're upset and know when to say the right thing to them. Computers will never replace teachers. A computer once beat me at chess, but it was no good for kickboxing. I beat it. So, you know, you can talk about computers all you like and how powerful they are, but ultimately it's the teacher that makes the difference, is what I'm saying here. Here are the new teacher roles for me. The first one is curating content, filtering content now, and there are lots of tools that allow us to do this. There is so much information out there, and we are bombarded by it continually as learners and as teachers. And we need to find ways now to filter that content and make it digestible in small chunks for the students to look at. And then they can go off and find more equivalent content. The second one is that we need to collaborate more together as teachers across the globe. There are really, really great best practices going on around the world, but you need to know where they are. And the only way you can do that really is to connect into social networks where other teachers go. And share best practice with each other. Find out what other people are doing that is really good and copy it or extend it. I think we need to collaborate globally now because we've got the ability to do it. And again, we'd be foolish if we ignored that opportunity. Co-learning, learning with our students, besides them. I always make a contract with every new group of students. I say to them, right, you're here to learn from me, but I also want to learn from you. Can we have an agreement here that we will learn from each other? And they look at me stunned at first, and then they reluctantly nod and say, yeah, okay, not believing that they can actually teach me anything. But of course they can, because I don't know everything, and neither do they. So this is a contract, the co-learning contract. We need to facilitate more and teach less. We mentioned earlier on about teaching to the test. We don't. We should not be teaching to test. Assessment should not be there to measure and to provide governments with metrics. Assessment should be there to help learners to learn better. That's the true method of assessment. The assessment where you feed forwards, not backwards. And you show students how to improve their work. So for me, facilitation is the heart of good assessment. Learning support obviously is going to continue, and so is inspiration. As I said before, computers will never replace teachers, but you see, the thing is, doctors save lives, but teachers make lives. That's the difference. Teachers influence children as they grow up all through their lives. You'll probably remember all your best teachers, won't you? The teachers that inspired you. And you'll probably want to model your teaching on what they did in the classroom when you were a child. Teachers make lives. That's the important thing to always remember. We will never, ever be replaced by computers because we will always be needed to inspire young people to become who they really need to be in life. Here's a digital curation tool. This one I use. This is my own digital curation page for Scoop It. This is called Future School. And I advise you to have a look at Scoop It, scoop.it, if you want to know how to curate content. This is one of several tools. There are others. Storify is another one. I think there are several others that are equivalent to this. But in essence, what it does is it provides anybody who subscribes to it with a current page of good content that you have selected, or content that someone else has asked you to have a look at. This is Derek Robertson here playing Guitar Hero at last year's assessment Scotland. And he simply said this: we need to trust the innate ability of learners to self-assess. Assessment is the battlefield, as Emma said earlier on. But I want to introduce to you, if you don't know about this already, Sitive Assessment, the idea that you measure the student against their own previous attainments. It's not norm referenced. It's not about the normal attainment levels that you'd expect from children at that level. What it is, it's about learning measured against previous attainment. And children do this all the time when they play games. They try and beat their own top score. They know what Sitive Assessment is without knowing the name for it. And I think this is something that we will see emerging in higher education as well as in schools, measuring students more honestly against their own skills and previous levels of skills. And something we practice in our own university in Plymouth, the idea of 3 forms of assessment, which we think is fairer. So firstly, the student, before they submit their piece of work, they will assess it themselves against a given set of criteria. And they will give themselves a mark. Then they will hand it to a peer. And the peer will mark it and give his mark or her mark on the same set of criteria. Then finally, the tutor will mark it on the same set of criteria, and we will average out the scores. Try it and see if it works for you. The research has been done, and we think it works. And I'm going to finish now with this statement here, and maybe one afterwards. Multimedia brought the world into the classroom. Smart technologies will take the classroom back out into the world again. We will see more of this happening as time goes on, as the new technologies emerge, as broadband technology becomes better and more ubiquitous, and as handheld devices become more cheaply available. And we'll see this in every aspect of society. We'll see it in every country as well. The future, if we're going to look at it at all, is about this. All too often, says John Gardner, we are giving young children or young people cut flowers, and we should actually be teaching them to grow their own plants. That's the bottom line. And with that, I say thank you very much.